Hi, everybody, and welcome to Scare Roots, the spookiest video game show on the internet. I'm your guest host, Vanessa.
Yay!
And I'm joined by your regular hosts, Johnny Brandon.
Hello.
And Jim Spoopy Skeleton Banks.
Ooh, hello.
Today we're talking about my favorite scary game, What Remains of Edith Finch? The scariest video game of all time.
This game is like asterisk scary.
It's
scary
more like
in quotes.
It's more like a actual life fear scary.
This is not a horror game.
Yeah,
but there are horrific things in it.
Mm-hmm. This is a game that will horrify you because when it's over, you'll be like, oh shit, I have some soul searching to do.
This is existential horror.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It is a walking simulator, which is the derivative way the internet calls it, because they don't like games that make you think.
Yeah, this isn't a real game. There's no skill involved.
There's not even any guns or swords.
There's no sweet loot.
You can't pwn noobs.
There are no microtransactions.
That's true. That is the one thing this game has going for it. There are no microtransactions.
But what would the loot boxes for this game be like if there were some?
Probably really depressing.
Yeah.
But I really wanted you guys to play this game because I think it's really interesting and it does things with the video game genre that you can only do in an interactive way. And I loved it. That's my review. Thanks for listening.
You're a monster.
Because I'm a monster. The game is ostensibly about Edith, who is the last of the Finch family line, because everyone else is dead. And she returns to her family home to sort some things out. And it's a real weird house.
Have you played Gone Home?
Yes.
This reminded me quite a bit of Gone Home, but with like more interactive elements.
Yeah, it's very Gone Home-y in that you're a woman alone in a house and you're sort of uncovering your family's past and secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we should just talk about the general concept of the game. So,
sure.
The game is structured in that Edith finds various diary entries or memorials to deceased family members. And when she finds one of these, you're drawn into the story of how that person died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she comes back to her family's home with like a family tree, and she's intent on kind of discovering the secrets of her family.
Mm-hmm.
And so each scenario you experience, she makes a note or a marker on this like family tree that she has.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of these deceased family members she never knew. And not only did she not know them, but it seems like as soon as they died, the house was sealed off. So that portion of the house, wherever their bedroom was, would just kind of be left as a tomb to this person.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's littered with corpses or anything, but each room that she uncovers is sort of a time capsule.
Right. They've all been... So this mansion was built. You find out because this guy tried to float his house from like Norway.
It was like Denmark, I think,
or
right?
Denmark all the way to the west coast of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
Norway.
when he got to where he's going to settle the house crashed into rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And he built another house, which he probably should have just done in the first place. But
yeah.
Did that guy die in the process of moving the house? The Sven or whoever the great grandfather was?
I think it's implied that he died while he was kind of building the house.
Okay.
I think the thing was he died near the wreckage of the original house.
That's what I thought.
Right?
Because he sort of used the wreckage to build this new house.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's what his son-in-law did, right?
Oh,
Or
right,
the
right.
remaining-
Yeah.
And there's a family did the family curse start in Denmark? Was he trying to get away from
Yeah,
that?
they floated the house to the U.S. to escape the family curse.
Mm-hmm. And they're very vague about what the family curse is, but it seems to be something about how all of them die young or before their time.
Mm-hmm. And so,
they're
boy,
right.
they do. Yep.
They sure do.
I think the curse is something like there's never more than one member of each generation that survives.
That makes sense.
So, like, if there are 3 siblings, 2 of them are gonna die prematurely, and then there would only be one to carry down the line.
Oh, wow.
Because all the brothers and sisters, like, there's only one left alive to have a child to continue the family. So every respective member of this family, if they have siblings, the siblings are killed or they die in another way. So there's never more than one to continue the Finch family name.
And I'd say that this family is defined by not only their fear of this curse, but also their vivid imaginations. Like, as we get to know them, they're all very creative people.
Even when they sort of think they're not, like the photographer guy
Yeah.
who had a super creative brother. Was the photographer guy, that was Edith's grandfather, right?
That was her dad. Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. Her mom's
Yeah,
father.
you don't
her
find out
grandfather.
what happened to Sanjay, and it seems like he was hit by the curse too.
No, it tells you that he was killed.
Yeah, it doesn't say how. Or he died.
I thought it was an accident.
Oh, was it? Okay. Maybe
Yeah.
I missed that.
Insofar as there is a puzzle element to this game, I would say it kind of has 2 aspects. One is just exploration. So moving through the house and figuring out how to get to the next space. It's not complicated, but usually involves finding and pulling a lever or something like that. But I think the real puzzle is when you're thrown into these flashbacks, you're not really given any instruction about how to complete the story. And each one uses some kind of different mechanic to advance the story. So you really just have to figure out where you are and what you're trying to do.
Right.
That's one of the things I like about the game is that even though there's no clear path forward, the game is good at, like, the atmosphere of the game and the environment is good at kind of propelling you forward through these environments.
I got stuck once, and that is after there's a comic book themed one, and after that you have to backtrack, and there's just a place you can turn I didn't notice before. And that one was I had to look up where to go because I was exploring this room and going back, and I was like, no, I don't think it's going back through all these other rooms. So basically, there's since they have sealed every room, there's secret passages that they haven't sealed off that connect all the hidden room or all the sealed up rooms, and that's how you're getting through it. The house is sort of a Winchester mystery house where it was built pretty big originally, like a mansion, and then someone added on extra rooms. At first, good carpenters did it, but then the last one was done by this kind of crazy brother who didn't really know how to build very well. So the final additions are real crazy.
Yeah, no safety rails, janky towers, just a whole bunch of nonsense.
And yet no one's killed from falling.
Nope.
You think that, I thought that's where it's leading, is that some of these deaths would be the result of how horrible this house is, right?
Technically, Edith's grandfather dies from falling when the deer knocks him from the cliff.
No one dies from falling.
No one dies from falling from construction.
Yeah. Was someone killed by a dragon statue?
I thought that they were. I thought that was like the guy who was originally building the house, because he made this dragon statue in the front, and
oh, okay.
I think it referenced something about him getting chomped by it or something.
Because that doesn't happen there's a couple of deaths that don't happen in the game, which is really interesting. Because the game definitely does not give you the whole story.
No. You kind of have to piece it together yourself.
And I felt like maybe I was missing something. Like, you don't find out how Edith died. So, like, what's this game actually called?
It's called What Remains of Edith Finch.
And is it about what remains of... Because you're, like, for most of the game, you're playing Edith Finch Jr., Little Edie. But there's also Big Edie, who is like the great grandmother of Little Edie, and sort of in a Grey Gardens kind of way.
Yeah, she's the matriarch of the family, and she is the true believer in this curse too.
Mm-hmm. It could have gone in a hereditary way, but it does not.
No. They all seem to be pretty fine people. Like, none of them are monsters in any way.
No,
or are they?
That's kind of what makes a lot of the deaths so shocking, is that these are very, like, human characters. They're not archetypes or caricatures of anything. And then when they all eventually die, it's very sad.
Speaking of death, the first flashback we experience is little Molly.
This is, I think, the most confusing for me, because it's, I think, the least standard narrative. So, what happened? So Molly is a little girl, and she dreams about being a cat. And you're reading her, so this is all in her voice, because she wrote it down in her diary. Some of them are diary entries, some of them are written by other people talking about someone. But in this case, it was her talking about herself. And she talks about being a cat and exploring and wanting to chomp on a birdo.
Yes, she's very hungry. Then she becomes an owl.
And you can control flying around as an owl.
You can pick up prey to eat.
Yeah.
That's pretty fun.
It is fun.
Then she becomes a shark. She dives into the ocean.
And then she becomes a sea monster.
Yeah, like a kraken kind of thing.
That's so neat.
And you murder everyone on the ship.
Yeah. She finds this ship, and it's like Christmas time. They're singing Christmas carols, and she's just like, chomp, chomp, chomp. Yeah, this also threw me off because it's the first part of the game. You're not really sure, is this a game about magical realism? Like, is she telling the truth? Or is she just being a bonkers kid or something like that? And it took me a minute to kind of get what actually happened to her.
Wait, there's something to get?
There is something to get.
What?
Yes.
Okay, full disclosure, I'm not good at interpreting metaphor. So, in the end of her, according to the text of the story, she's eaten by a monster.
Yeah, she sort of says that the monster is coming to eat her, but also
you control it.
The monster is her. It's a very confusing.
So what actually happened?
So,
how do you know this?
I know it because I thought about it and I figured it out.
Okay.
So, at the very beginning of her story, we're told that she has been sent to bed without supper. And she is very hungry. And we sort of move her through her room, and she has a gerbil that she thinks about eating, but she does not eat him. But she does eat some gerbil food. She eats, I forget what else she eats, something in the room. And then the last thing she eats are holly berries off of a holly bush in her bathroom, because it's Christmas time and holly berries are poisonous.
Oh.
Yeah. And the game won't progress until you eat the berries.
Yeah. And she eats them, and then the narrative goes like, I ate a lot of things that night, so it's like, basically what happens to Molly is she was tripping balls because she was poisoned, and then she dies.
Oh.
It's very sad.
It is sad.
Wow, I missed that one.
Yeah, it took me a minute, it wasn't until the game was over that I really went back and thought about it, and I was like, oh no.
Oh, okay. Because I thought, I was like, did she just magically disappear? I kind of thought it was a magical realism thing because there's another case of that later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one's the one that tripped me up the most because, like, they're all pretty explainable deaths until that one.
Yeah.
So which is the saddest death?
Well, for me, there are two.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is bath time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is Gregory.
I think I knew this one I could understand the metaphor of what was going to happen from the second it starts.
Yeah, and I think that's the scariest part because you're used to...
This is the shortest one, yeah.
You're used to being put into these people who are either going to die or, in one or two cases, witness a death.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, with Gregory, you sort of are put into this world and you're a little baby.
Yeah, and you're just like kind of splashing around in the tub. The mom comes in and drains the bathwater, but in the game you take control of his little toys that he's playing with in the bathtub, and with the toys you turn the bathwater back on, and in a very cartoonish way you drown.
Mm-hmm. And it's narrated by the father of Gregory, who talks about how scared he is about Gregory because Gregory seems to have such an active imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And the dad seems to know at this point that active imagination is at least part of what leads to the Finch's deaths.
Right.
Yeah, and what's being narrated is actually a letter that the father wrote after his death.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's describing, his son and his imagination, and then he's also kind of forgiving his I think at that point it's his ex-wife, forgiving his ex-wife at the same time.
Yeah, which is sad and sweet and
just another layer of sadness.
Very kind of real, as
and it's written on divorce papers, so
yeah. It's like it's definitely their divorce, and just made me think of parents who leave children in car seats. Like, it happens, and it's horribly tragic.
Yeah, yeah. So the mom goes to take a couple of phone calls, and that's when the baby drowns, and playing as the baby, you're just going through this magical, like, reminds me of playing in the bath as a little kid and like having all sorts of... You're playing with your
bath toys and having these fantasies, and there's this great classical music. I can't remember exactly what piece it is.
Yeah.
And, it's very whimsical and beautiful, but also horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the movements of the music change as you interact with what's in the bathtub, which I thought was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a record, so... As you if you slowly drag like the duck, it just like it's like, but then you start getting the rhythm, and it's like, do 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 do.
That's the one. Is that Swan Lake?
I think that is Swan Lake.
Yeah.
Terrible, and it's awful because you can't not have this baby die. And I think that's kind of the thing of the game. It's like everyone you're put into, what's going to happen. And you don't want it to happen.
Like from the conceit of the game, that you are put into someone's life sort of as they die. And I was like, oh, does this mean Edith is going to, like, your character Edith is going to die at the end? And the answer is sort of.
Mm-hmm. So that one was very sad for me, but I think the most impactful for me might be Lewis, who works at the fish factory.
Yeah, there were two deaths in this game that really shocked me, and his was one, and which one is the one that stayed in like the bunker his whole life?
Walter.
That one.
I remember you said you were attached to that.
Shocked me.
Do you want to talk about that one? Because that one didn't have that much emotional impact on me.
That one was sad for me. But that one's another one that's a lot of metaphor, kind of mixed stuff, but then a very real ending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Walter, his story, he's like he witnesses the death of his sister, who was this famous actress, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it never really explains how she died. She was murdered, and he witnesses it. And then after that, he becomes super agoraphobic. And he refuses to leave this underground, like, basement bunker that's part of the house. And his story is told through him just, like, opening these cans of peaches across these intervening years. And then when he's old, I believe he's maybe in his 50s, he decides, like, I'm done being afraid. I'm going to leave the bunker. And he does, and he leaves through this, like, tunnel that runs under the house that leads to these train tracks. And, he makes it to the train tracks, and he turns around and he gets hit by a train.
Mm-hmm.
Which was shocking.
But
it was pretty surprising.
I did like that his hobby when he was in the bunker for 30 years was model trains.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah.
And he refers to hearing a monster, which I think was hearing the train going. And then he talks about how he hasn't heard it in a while. So I think that maybe the story is like, as we advanced towards the future, train travel became less popular. So maybe it didn't run as frequently or something.
No, and the train bridge that he's walking towards also is after this not accident, but this was it was an accident in 2005 when he dies. I guess the train tracks are gone because when you walk there, the bridge is gone. It's only 10 years or 11 years later.
Mm-hmm. So it seemed like that particular line was running out of favor, and Walter just had very poor timing.
So, okay, that makes sense. Cause it would shake every day and he thought it was the monsters after him. Now I didn't put two and two together that he witnessed Barbara's death, because he was a little kid at the time in that one. And that one was very good. It was like a graphic novel where you're playing through chunks. Like it had this very comic booky,
it was made in the style of like a pulp comic from like the 50s or 60s.
Right.
And she's like this childhood actress who was like a scream queen.
Well, I thought she was a child star, and then she wasn't an actress, but she had a reputation for being a child star, I thought.
Yeah, she was
little Barbara or whatever, right?
But I think she was in a horror movie.
Yeah, because she was known for her scream.
Okay.
And then she was going to be in a new horror movie, but she couldn't scream right. And and that was the problem. And so the text of the game is that she's killed by the monsters of the movies she's been in, basically. Right. But do you think she was killed by the boyfriend? Because there's a lot about him pushing her to do this.
Yeah, I think it was the boyfriend.
And then he disappears after she dies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But her ear is left?
Yeah. Which I guess, do you think that's text or, because that's what the game says. The only thing left of her.
It's hard to tell, yeah.
It is hard to tell, yeah. I think that's part of the theme of the game, right? Is
what's real and what isn't, and
yeah, and it's very much like the myth of this family. So almost their lives and deaths become these mythical events that kind of get told down through the generations a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the game was going to take a left turn. One of the last ones you get is this, it's a super short one, I think, about this guy who, takes a magic door out of his life when he's 10. What was the action? I don't think there's any action to his story, right?
No, it's just like a flip book, essentially.
Right, that's it. Yeah, so there's a flip book about him finding this magic door to another kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And and he takes it and disappears. And every other person has a death, a death date. And Edith refused to give his grave marker a death date. It's more a memorial because she did not believe he was dead.
Yeah, he either ran away or maybe got stuck somewhere, but I don't think they found the body.
Yeah, he's the only Finch that doesn't have a headstone at the family cemetery. He just has a memorial.
Right.
saying that like they don't know that he's dead.
And you can find the door. And I thought, like, because I saw it before doing his story, so I was like, oh, I guess that's the next place to go. But no, it's just a large painting of a door. Mm-hmm. Did you find his door?
I
Where
don't
was his
know
door
that I
at?
did.
So he's got a 2-story house, a playhouse castle that someone made for him. I think Walter no, it wasn't Walter, but someone made him a 2-story castle. And on the bottom floor is a painting of a door, exactly like the one in his cartoon.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there's footprints that lead right to it.
Oh. So maybe he really did escape.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
What I loved about Lewis's story was the mechanic of it, which was
Yes.
not like anything I'd ever experienced before.
I think his was the longest one, too.
It was pretty long, and I think all us gamers can relate to what he had going on. Lewis was working in a fish factory, chopping the heads off fish. And you use the left stick through his whole story to just move the fish back and forth. Mm-hmm. So it's like you do the same repetitive action that Lewis has going on. And then with the right stick, you navigate his imagination.
Mm-hmm. Which is sort of it looks like at first a very basic Atari labyrinth game, and then gets more complex and more like it goes through the sort of console generations almost in terms of complexity.
It does, yeah.
Which is
and
neat.
the whole time there's a layer of narration from his psychiatrist on top of it.
Right. Sort of talking about his maladaptive daydreaming and how he's getting resentful that the real world doesn't match his fantasy world where he's this big hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's basically like retreating further and further into his own imagination. And as he does, or as she narrates his progress, the game becomes more and more detailed and takes up more and more of the screen. Which is awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. Neat. But you have to keep the fish going the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that there are some obstacles that become fish if you aren't paying attention, and talks about how he became better at his job, but also more removed from reality.
Mm-hmm. Because he could just stand there all day doing it, and people are like, oh, wow, he's really great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I really connected with in this one was he can you have some choices in the narrative, and he can go for a prince or princess of his dreams. Mm-hmm. And the prince is a big bear.
He was.
That's awesome. I was very excited by that.
Bear.
Uh-huh. Yeah, more of a pocket bear, really. Looked like a little bit like Jasmine's dad, except younger.
Like the Sultan.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a part where you can choose between him like going through like storms or radiant rainbows. And I was like, heck yeah, radiant rainbows. And he's like sailing around.
I went for serpents.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. So you got to go through
I think I saw
serpents.
The serpents too.
Yeah. And this one is a metaphor for suicide.
Yeah. Because he decides to crown himself.
In the fish chopping machine.
In the fish chopping machine.
He does, yeah.
Because he talks about how he needs to get rid of the physical life and just move full time into his dream world where he is the crowned prince.
Mm-hmm. And as he is deciding to do this, he enters his throne room and everyone in his imagination is cheering for him. Mm-hmm. His pocket bear's there.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the narration from the psychiatrist too, because she basically acknowledges that like his regular life was so routine and the extravagance of his daydreams was so overwhelming for him that like he chose to acknowledge that as real and not his actual life, and he eventually just made the decision that he was going to fully commit to his daydream. Mm-hmm. Which was like, it's hard to describe. There's like a sense of almost like wonder to all of these things. Like, it's whimsical, but it's super dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with Lewis and Greg. Well, we talked about Gregory and how colorful and cartoony that was.
Mm-hmm.
But all of them sort of have this element of hope to them. Like getting out of the basement. It's like he freed himself from this obsession.
Yeah,
and
like they die, but their deaths are under very hopeful circumstances. Like
Except for Barbara.
Except for Barbara. Yeah, she's murdered horrifically.
yeah.
But even that is told in like a very like as part of like this fictional narrative is the way her death is presented.
Yeah, and it's presented like a movie story, which is what she aspired to. You know,
Right.
to
Yeah,
be-
it's like it's almost told like an episode of Tales from the Crypt is what it reminded me of.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, well, because those are based on comics, like what that is. Like the Tales from the Crypt was originally
Yeah, like old
an
pulp
EC comic kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I love just navigating the panels of the comic book.
I think that one was the scariest one like that one was the most straight
It
up
definitely
horror.
was.
Like there was a dread that I didn't because the music was so joyful and fun in the bath time one. I didn't get that horrified by it.
Mm-hmm.
I did with the one with the swing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
That
for
one was
sure.
so
The swing
sad.
one, that swing one was incredibly sad. Basically, this kid swings and ends up swinging so high.
He wanted to go around, like
He wanted to go around, yeah, where his swing was suspended from, and when he flew out of the swing, right?
into the sea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because
Just
the Finches,
sad.
for all their fear, they build these rickety, bizarre house, and they put the swing set like on the edge of a cliff, and a lot of their choices are really not designed for protection or preservation,
Right.
except for the hunting trip, I guess.
Yeah.
That one was also shocking to me.
That was because I was not expecting the father to die. What was his
Yeah.
name?
I don't remember.
He wasn't Gus, was he?
Was that Calvin?
It might have been Calvin.
There's Sam and Calvin, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was Sam. Sam was the hunter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sam was the grandfather of Edith, right?
Yes.
So I think it's Edith's
father of-
mom who has
father
the
of
camera.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that sort of explains why Edith's mom wants nothing to do with the family for a long time, and sort of goes away to build houses in India, and that's where she meets the dad of the main character.
Yeah, because Sam, Edith's grandfather, was just obsessed with making sure that the curse didn't get Dawn. And so he's like, I'm going to make you a survivalist. You're going to know how to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they go out to the woods and she has a camera. And the whole mechanic of that is just taking a picture of whatever it is you're supposed to take a picture of.
It's Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
I like when you take a picture of him taking a leak on the tree.
And he's like, take it, Dawn.
Wait, we were chatting with Haley?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Sorry, back to the podcast. So do you like that it doesn't tell you what happened to Big Edith?
I loved that. I thought that was great. Because that's kind of the last flashback that we experience. And you've gone through this whole, family story. And we know that Big Edith is the matriarch. And so it seems like we're finally going to get her story. But this is sort of like, is it a diary or is it?
Yeah, I think it's a letter. I think it's a letter that she's left to
Yeah.
Who are
Little
you
Edith.
talking about?
Big Edith.
Oh, yeah.
That's the
believe
one
that's
where
a
you kind
letter.
of get cut off in the middle of it.
Yeah.
That would be that Edie is who they refer to the grandmother as.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So Edie is like, I had my own mysterious experience. And she starts talking about this foggy night when the sea retracted, essentially, like before
Oh,
tsunami.
man.
And she went out in the fog to go to the house where her father had died, where they
It
had
was the
tried
first
to,
time that it was really, like, sometimes you could see the tip of it, but the whole house was there.
Yeah.
And this was my favorite one, I think.
It was great.
Me too.
Do you want to talk about how it ends and what we see in the fog?
You don't?
I don't remember how this one ends, actually.
We just see, like, I think there's a deer out there. I noticed that.
There's the deer, and there's like you see things from the house, and I thought it was going to be that you walk into the house, because that's sort of
Me
where
too.
it was going, but you get interrupted by Dawn.
Yeah, by Edith's mother. And she's like, don't tell her this story. You're full of shit. Nobody wants to hear this. And then it just cuts out.
Yeah.
Well, she's also the only one who seems to be trying to like get the family to understand that like their deaths, like death is natural, right? Because like even though like a lot of these deaths are untimely and maybe part of this curse, like she seems to be the only one almost, I don't want to say at peace with it, but seemingly having an understanding with what's going on.
Well, but she's also not dealing with it well. Like the second someone dies, she seals off their room and creates these mausoleums, which I don't think is a healthy manner.
That almost felt really sweet because she keeps like their section of the house is almost like a shrine to them, which didn't feel like
with
unnatural
little eye
to
holes,
me.
so you could like look
Yeah,
into
so you
their
can peek
room.
into the room.
Peepholes, yes, yeah.
I mean, she definitely has her issues.
Yeah, and also the house is kind of she's an insane book collector, so the house is just packed with books.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would like be something to do with her death or something, like a irony.
Mm-hmm. Like a hoarder's kind of thing or something, but no.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dawn seems to have escaped the curse mostly, right? Like,
Well, she dies of a something like a cancer.
yeah,
or,
some kind of
Yeah,
sickness.
it feels like a cancer.
yeah.
But not in any kind of whimsical way.
No, and you don't get to play through that, which I'm very
Yeah.
glad for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then our story ends with Edith having completed her family tree, save one spot.
Oh,
And who's that spot for, John?
her son?
Mm-hmm.
Who is she? Like, she's talking to you throughout it, and like, as an egotistical player, you might be thinking it's me she's talking to. But no, she's writing a letter to her child.
Her unborn child.
And there's kind of a wham line, as TV Tropes likes to call it, when you're climbing up the roof of the house, and she's like, this is not what I want to be doing at 28 weeks pregnant. Or 22 weeks pregnant. You're like, oh no.
Yeah, and her story really isn't clear. We do see that her hand is in a cast.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the very end, but I don't think that's really addressed.
Yeah. So there's definitely untold elements to the story. And she's like, well, so if you're reading this, then I'm dead.
Mm-hmm.
So things have not gone. She was hoping to end it once and for all. But now I think she's a little worried that she's going to pass it on to her kid. And she says she's not sure if telling him about the curse will make it better or worse.
Yeah. She's like, I don't know because so many of their deaths seem to have happened because they believed it was inevitable that it would happen. Like certainly
I think
Train Guy and Hunting Guy.
I think that's one of the reasons why there was because it's presented as Edith's mother, Dawn, having a very contentious relationship with her mother, Edie. And it's kind of presented like Edie is almost like, setting in motion these events by letting them know about the curse and passing these stories down that lets them know that their lives are finite.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really interesting.
But also that's her heritage and her family. And
yeah.
So it's a very interesting game. It's not like anything I'd played before.
Yeah, it was, I really enjoyed it. For sure.
Good. I was worried that you wouldn't.
What? I like things. I like thinking with my brain.
Well, I know, but it's just so weird, and it's not really a horror game, but I think it stuck with me way more than any jump scare kind of game ever has.
Yeah, me too, for sure. The way that the deaths are presented in the kind of the way that the curse is there, it's kind of an is it there or isn't it there, and the way that the characters ultimately die in the game is all very, it's very sad, but it's also like, I don't know, I was really invested in these characters because of their deaths, which is really an interesting way to like think about video game characters. Yeah,
because we often see characters just at the moment of their death, but they're, mindless mobs or someone we're killing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or just a random person being attacked by monsters to set the scope, or not stakes, set the stakes of the scene.
Mm-hmm. And
you're mostly watching these characters die through circumstances that the player themselves cannot control, which is like difficult to watch and play through, but at the same time, like is like I felt very invested in it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we can't underemphasize how well written it is, because without that writing, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a visually pretty game, and it's interesting to figure out the mechanics, like figuring out using the joysticks to control like the left leg and the right leg to pump the swing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some kite flying at one point, and pointing the camera, opening the peach cans. Everything's pretty simple, but the narration really makes you like these characters before you have to give them up.
Yeah, and one thing that I really liked is that every death is felt like most deaths are felt throughout the other like character episodes. So like, and it's easy to imagine, like in the kite flying one takes place during his, like the character that you're playing as, his father's wedding to his stepmother.
Right, after his mother's died.
Yeah, and just imagining the effect that death has on that event and then that marriage it's very interesting to think about. Like you're not normally presented with circumstances like that in video games.
No, definitely not. And by the time you get to Lewis, who's one of our last ones, he's lived with all of these stories, and I think that's reflected in how he retreats to this fantasy world. And in his room, there's a lot of pot paraphernalia and video games. It's like he is all about escapism.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's implied that he's recovering from like substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those things where he was very into pot to the point where it's disrupting his life, and so he has quit that, but now has that's why he latched on to the fantasy of the labyrinth instead.
Mm-hmm. But then you think about how he's the brother of this kid who just disappeared, and how that does often lead to some kind of substance abuse in families because it's so difficult to deal with.
And his father died when he was young, and
his weird uncle lived in the basement.
And and no one knew about it until I don't think anyone knew about it at all. Like,
well, Edie knew, because Edie would bring him food and things like that.
But she, like, little Edie didn't know about it until she read about it. She thought he died somewhere else.
Yeah, she had no idea. And that was Dawn's brother, and it's not clear if she knew or not, but she certainly didn't tell little Edith about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one was a very tough one for me, was the Walter one. I found that very affecting.
I did too, like, because the way that he talks about it, I think the way he phrases it is he's living the same day over and over.
Right.
And he's opening these peaches, and then he ultimately decides, like, I can't keep living the same day over and over, and he forces his way out of this thing. Like, he uses a sledgehammer and busts his way out.
Right.
So he, like, puts effort into freeing himself from this thing and confronting this monster, and the monster ultimately does kill him.
Yeah. I really thought he was just going to walk off and never come back. But
so did I.
that's not what happened.
I wonder why, like, Sanjay wasn't a part of it, like little Edith's dad. But
Maybe because he wasn't like a blood relative.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's like you don't hear about Kay, the wife who divorces. Was it Sam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't hear about him, so who knows?
Yeah, but like playing as all of these, it's really interesting playing as all these characters, knowing that their deaths are inevitable.
Yeah.
And no
like,
matter how you play the game, it's going to end with them being killed, which like is I've never played a game like that before.
I guess there's what was that game? Oh, another Scare Roots game has a kind of similar theme. What's that one? Eternal Darkness. That's where you play.
I've never played that one. I would love to play that game.
If you can find a Wii, you'll need a Wii to play it, basically.
I have a Wii.
Ooh. That would be a good one. Although I don't think it's a Vanessa likable one. I don't know.
That's okay. I'm just a guest.
But you should come back for Soma, because Soma's a lot like this, and there is a mode you can play with no combat.
Oh, nice.
Ooh, I'd love to play Soma.
Yeah. Soma is definitely a Scare Roots candidate. It is terrifying, at least. I found it a little too hard with combat, so I kind of want to try it again without.
Well, thanks for playing this game, so I
No
could finally
problem.
talk about it with someone.
I'm glad you recommended it. I was very affected by this game, and it still makes me feel things thinking about it. So I'm glad to have played it.
Yeah, it's very unusual for a game to be that successful, I think, in emotion. If you liked it and you haven't played Gone Home, that's similar. And also similar is Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, but I can't say that either one of those had the same emotional impact on me.
Right.
It's also a game I love, and I don't think I ever want to play again.
I went through a phase of playing games like Gone Home and To the Moon and stuff, but they like games with an emotional investment do require work in a way that most video games don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're hard. There's not a lot. I mean, replayability is tough for those games.
Mm-hmm. It's short, though. It's like 3 hours, would you say, thereabouts?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
something
think
like
games like this, Gone to the Rapture, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter is another one that I really liked. And Dear Esther is another one that I've played that I really enjoyed.
Oh, yeah, I think I have Dear Esther, but I haven't played it yet. I have to be in the right
really
mood
good.
for sure for this kind of game.
Yeah. It takes a certain like level. There's like a minimum level of investment required for these games to play them and get through them.
Yeah, they're not good. Ooh, I'm home from work. I want to play something fun to relax.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do it sort of when like, oh, I am sort of in the mood to read a book, but I don't want to do that. You know, it's like...
Yes.
Because you're not a nerd.
Because I'm not a nerd. So this, I would say, is sort of the bridge between books and video games.
So, Jim and I... do we get? I guess we should give a final review. We haven't come up with a good review scale yet. I know didn't we have a really dumb one last time? It wasn't pumpkins. Do you remember, Jim?
I don't remember exactly. It was something like that, though.
It was something real dumb.
Right. Well, here's an interesting question, which we touched on a little bit. Do you think this game is scary?
I think it is in a very like I'm thinking about my own inevitable death kind of way. It makes you like think about your own mortality, which is existentially can be terrifying.
At some points, yes. I'd say the Barbara one is definitely scary.
Mm-hmm. That's the most classic horror for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
but I think the game is good.
Yeah, it's definitely good.
It's super good.
And I didn't think it would fit into Instant Classic or Versus.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Partially because, and I guess we should have put content warnings at the beginning.
Child
content
loss.
warning for child loss.
I'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
Because Matt is one of those people who is very sensitive to any kind of horror movie where a kid is in danger or something. My mom is like that too.
Mm-hmm.
And
2 with certain like child abuse, I have trouble watching. But like child death is, if in the right context, I think it's okay.
Yeah, you got through Hereditary, so
I did get through Hereditary.
I haven't seen that yet. I need to.
It's a traumatizing horror movie.
I'm sure I'll love it. I love Toni Collette. She's a great
it's so
actress.
good.
She's amazing in that.
Toni Collette is like my favorite actress, and like it's so affecting and good, and all just comes together in such a satisfying way. Like,
Nice.
I love it.
Yeah. So Jim and I have been discussing other games. Obviously, I would like Vanessa to come back for Soma sometime.
I was going to try to do a pun like, so my schedule might allow for that.
Well, this won't be probably till next year. So
2020, the year so twice we named it twice.
Yes. Because this Scare Roots is one we do when we have time. It is not on a set schedule. Ooh.
That's what makes it so fun. It's opportunistic, and only when we feel like we have something scary enough to play and talk about, which makes it fun.
And it's what makes it so scary, because you don't expect it.
It just appears when you least expect it.
It's a jump scare podcast.
It's in my feed.
And so Jim and I have discussed the next 2 games. So if you want to get on board and try playing along with us, first we're going to play Dad Space.
What? Are you talking about Daddy Dating Simulator?
Deborah Space. Deb Space.
Dead Space is a good game.
Now, I have Dead Space Extraction for the Wii. Is that the same game?
It is not.
Okay. I have Dead Space 3 on PC. Is that the same game?
That's not the same game. That game is also good, but in a very different way.
Yeah, I think each game's kind of a different genre, which is neat.
It is neat. And, like, people really don't like Dead Space 3, but I think they mostly don't like it just because it's not Dead Space 1 or 2. But for a good third-person sci-fi action game, it's a good, well-made game.
Yeah.
Is it about being all alone on the space station?
You're not all alone, but you're mostly alone on the space station. Yes.
That's
on
too
a ship.
scary.
The first one's a ship. And there's
it's a haunted ship. It's like Event Horizon kind of.
Yes, very much.
Which is a movie that terrifies me.
Yeah. There's a lot of body horror and jump scares. And I played Dead Space 2 right when I got my first set of surround sound headphones, and I had to take them off because no way. It is the sound design in those games especially is amazing, but it's a little too much. I'm easily spooked.
I was playing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines this afternoon. With my headphones on, and I did get spooked. There were some jump scares. And I'm supposed to be a big bad vampire.
And after that, we are definitely going to play Dino Crisis.
Oh man, scary, but in a different way.
Oh, I love PS1 horror games. It's like...
So do I.
It's my favorite genre, maybe. Like, I want to play every PS1 horror game with Jim.
I love them too. Like, I played so many of them as a kid. I want to play all of them again. Dino Crisis is a game that I played and thought was ridiculous, and but I love it so much. I have such affection for that game.
It's a real dumb. It is Resident Evil with dinosaurs.
That sounds too scary. Everyone knows that the thing that most scares me is a ghost that you don't know is a ghost. And the second thing that most scares me is a dinosaur.
Oh. We could play Fatal Frame sometime. That does have ghosts you don't know are ghosts.
Why would I want to do that? I
But
just
also
told
ghosts,
you it scares me.
Ghosts you know are ghosts.
Well, those are okay.
But you have to take pictures of them, and you can only see them through your camera. So, like...
They could be like right there, and then you look,
and then you take up your ghost camera.
Games with mechanics like that are just like tension generators for me. Like so hard to play.
Now,
but I love
Fatal Frame 1, 2, and 3 are available for cheap online, but I think mostly on PS3. You can download the PS2 games for cheap. And I think they might be on Xbox One. You could do a Google, because I know that they were released on Xbox and PS2.
You know what? I'm going to buy a PS3. I need a PS3 really bad.
Yeah, they're $50 online. So I think if you are looking for, like, if you never played a 360 or PS3, right now is the cheapest they'll ever be. So I would buy one, like, just go on Facebook, look for like a second generation one, like not the first. Both PS3 and 360 original gen are bad and unreliable. But if you get the redesigns for both of them, they are much better.
I will do that. I'll find one this weekend.
Yeah, I was thinking I need to buy a new 360 because mine just died.
Oh, no.
I had a 360 that got the red ring like 5 years ago, and I've hung on to it. And then when I moved to this new apartment a few weeks ago, I ended up finally throwing it away.
Well, on your PS4 right now, I think all the Fatal Frames are on sale. You could buy them now just because they're like $3 each. And then have them ready for your PS3. Because you buy them on PS4, but you play it on your PS3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'd recommend that. Anyway, thank you, everyone, for listening to Scare Roots. I hope you are going to come... I hope
you're scared.
with the vampires and blood. And yeah... if you like this podcast,
is an inevitable part of life.
You might like our other podcasts, Square Roots, where we play a classic RPG one chunk at a time, or we have our Patreon where we go through lots of stuff. Classic games, bad games.
Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel movies, new games. We talk about new games sometimes.
Mm-hmm. We just reviewed Detroit Become Human, which is terrifying.
No.
John, we should do a control cast.
Oh, on which podcast?
I don't know.
That could be an instant classic. I'd like to play that.
That could be. Yeah, you should. It's really good.
We should wait till maybe Black Friday. I bet it would go on sale.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for it to be patched on the PS4 because I have heard it's a little jank.
It definitely needs to be patched on the PS4. I have the PS4 version, and some of it is rough.
Mm-hmm. I've got it on PC, and even though I have that, I mean, it was a mid-range PC I bought a year and a half ago, I have to set everything to low for it to run nice. So, that game is a bugbear. Anyway, goodbye, everybody.
Oh, goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.